Welcome back. In part 1 of this tutorial, we created this orb flowing material. In this video, we're going to create a glass substrate material and add some really cool effects to it. We're going to dive a little deeper into Substrate and learn some of its capabilities. Let's get started. This video is brought to you by my Patreon. Gain access to over 10 courses on Unreal Engine C++, blueprints, and game art in Blender and Substance Painter. You'll have instant access to a vault of over 1,000 lecture videos with over 270 hours of content, with new Patreon exclusive videos being released every week. This collection of courses includes material from beginner to advanced, from learning the basics of Unreal Engine to how to make multiplayer games, set up dedicated servers and connecting to cloud databases, learn the gameplay ability system, combat mechanics, shooter mechanics, and so much more. Join the Druid Mechanics Discord community, a Discord server with over 37,000 members of all skill levels in game development and art. Follow the link in the description to join the Druid Mechanics Patreon today. Now, in my materials folder, I'm going to make a new material called m_glass. And I'm going to open up mglass. Now, we're not going to use the default settings for glass. What we're going to do is we're going to select the root node here, and we're going to change its blend mode. We can't have opaque if we want translucency. Now, Substrate has a number of options that the legacy system does not have, and some of them are more expensive. For instance, translucent colored transmittance is the most expensive. We can achieve glass with translucent gray transmittance. This is less expensive. I'm going to select that, and if I scroll down a bit, for lighting mode, I'm going to change it to surface forward shading, as we'll be able to make glass with this, and we won't have to use the most expensive setting. And just like we did with our orb material, we're going to create a substrate slab. So we'll search for slab, we'll stick that into the front material, and the first thing I'm going to do on this slab is select it, and in the details panel, choose subsurface type. We want to use subsurface scattering. That lets us determine how the light passes through the object. So instead of diffusion, we're going to choose simple volume. Now, it doesn't look transparent yet, but we're going to use subsurface scattering, MFP, which stands for mean free path. So we need to hook something into this. What we can do is hold 3 and left click to get a color and just make it completely white. I don't want any color in this, but I'm going to take that color and search for substrate, transmittance to mean free path. This gives us the mean free path value that we need for SSS MFP here. So as soon as I hook that up, I have what looks not quite like glass, but it's transparent. And as you can see, we have a little bit of reflection on it. We can change that reflection a bit. We can give it some roughness or smoothness. I'm going to hold S and left click. I'm going to make a parameter called roughness, and I'm going to hook it up to roughness. It's 0, so I'm going to get what looks like a bubble. It's got some reflections on the surface, still doesn't quite look like glass, but we're getting there. Okay, now we can make this have refraction. So just like glass refracts the light, our material can do that too if we select the root node here and search for refraction. There's a refraction method. We're going to change that from none to index of refraction. Now I want this refraction input, but it's grayed out. So I need to search my details for refraction again, and that's because I changed refraction method to index of refraction from F0. That's not what I wanted. I wanted index of refraction, and that allows me to use that refraction input. So I'm going to make a parameter for that called refraction. And for glass, a pretty decent value is 1.33, but of course it's a parameter and we're going to adjust it as we go. So I'm going to hook that in, and that gives us some glass refraction. And we'll really see how this works once we add this to our orb. So we're getting there. We have almost what looks like glass. I'd like to give this a little bit of a normal map. I can even give it a moving normal map so it looks wavy and sort of magical. So I need a normal map to use. So if you got the project files for this, you have this in your textures. I'm going to use T-base tile detail normal. This is a tileable texture, and it's a normal map. So I'm going to bring it in as a texture sample, and I want to pan this texture sample. So I'm going to hold P and left click to get a panner node and hook that into UVs. And for speed, I need a value for at least the Y. I want it to pan up and down. So I can append vector and hook this up. And for the B, I'm going to make a parameter called normal panning Y. I'm going to set it to a very small number, 0.007. And that's going to be for the B. And then I'm just going to hold 1 and click to put a 0 in for the A. And now my texture sample is panning, and I want this to be right here hooked up to the normal map. So I'm going to make some room for it. But before I hook it up to normal, I want to run this through a flatten normal. And flatten normal allows me to give some flatness, and this can be a parameter as well. So let's make a scalar parameter value, and I'm going to call it flatten normal. I'll give it a value of 1, well, make it 0.95 actually, and hook that into the flatness, and this goes into the normal, and that's giving me a panning normal with some waviness to it. So we'll see how that can look as we adjust that parameter on a material instance as well. So this is looking pretty nice. And what's cool about the roughness for the substrate slab for this type of material is if I give it some roughness, it actually makes a sort of frosted glass look. So that's going to be really cool as we mess with that as well. So let's see what this looks like on the orb. I'm going to save the material. We're not quite done with it yet, but I just want to see it on my mesh. So I'm going to make a material instance called MI glass. And I'm going to go back to BP orb and add a new sphere. We're going to keep the old one, but I'm going to click add, choose sphere. This will be called glass. And I'm going to set that to the glass material. Notice that as soon as I did that, we have some refraction going on. As I zoom in and out, the inner orb gets smaller and bigger. This is the refraction of the glass at work. Now I can go into my level to see what these look like on the orbs as well. And it looks like something got out of whack here with this one. I think I actually took that orb and moved it. Yeah, its location has been moved. I'm going to reset it so that it's in the center here. And now I can see what that refraction looks like. We can also see what the glass looks like as well. Now, it was very important that we used material parameters so that we can adjust these. If you don't like that much refraction, you can take your material instance for the glass and adjust it. So if I take MI glass and I open it up, I can adjust these material parameters as I look at my object. So expanding my parameters, I'm going to take the refraction and I'm going to adjust it until I'm happy with it. It looks like it's lopsided, but if you move over, if you look at it head on, you'll see that it's centered. This is just the refraction of light. This is what glass does. We can adjust that roughness as well if we want to give it a little bit of cloudiness. And we can also mess with the flatten normal if we want to see that normal map more prominently. And we could adjust the normal panning as well if you want that to be faster. Maybe you want it to look like flowing water or something like that. But I'm going to keep it low. 0.01 is probably fine. Okay, so it's looking better. Keep in mind you can also adjust your orb material parameters as well. If you want a little bit more emissive, you can crank that up. If you want more cloud darkness, you can crank that up. It's really up to you. Okay, let's continue with our glass material. So I'm going to go back to mGlass. And the next thing I'd like to add to this substrate material is some iridescence. You know the sort of rainbow colors you see on top of oil or a soap bubble? We can add those here in Substrate. Some people don't like that, but it looks pretty cool, so we're going to add that. First, I need a texture sample, preferably a tileable one. So I'm going to go into my textures and get tiling noise 06. And I'd like to pan this as well. So I'm going to use a panner node and hook that into my UVs. I'll go ahead and copy the nodes that I hooked into my other panner and plug them in here for the speed, but I can have a parameter for this. So I'm going to add a new parameter called thin film panning Y. I'll make this 0.004 and hook this into B. And if I preview this, I just have this slowly panning texture. So we just have a tiling noise texture, but I'm going to use this with a type of node specific to Substrate called Substrate Thin Film. With Thin Film, I'm going to run the RGB from texture sample into thickness. Let's see what this looks like if we preview it. So this is the sort of effect that I was looking for. And we can change the index of refraction for the thin film by hooking something into IOR. So I'm going to just create a scalar parameter called thin film IOR and plug that in. And I'll set this to about 3 to get this sort of effect. Of course, it's a parameter, right? Now we can also give the thin film its own normal. I can take the normal from our flattened normal here, and I can hook that in. So I'm just going to give it a named reroute node here called flatten normal. And that's what I'm going to hook in to the normal here, flatten normal. And that's also what I'm going to hook in for the normal on my thin film, flatten normal. Make sure you get the named reroute called flatten normal. So now that I have this thin film, we have a specular color and an edge specular color. Those are great for F0 and F90. So we can hook these in, specular color to F0 and edge specular color. I'm just going to shift left click on this and then come down to F90 and shift left click on it, and that's going to connect those. And I'm going to stop previewing this node, and now I can see that sort of oil soap bubble effect on there, and it's panning too, so it looks like it's moving. So that just gives us another effect on top of everything else. I'm going to hit apply and take a look at my orb to see what that looks like. And we'll see it in the level as well. And that gives us a pretty nice effect. So we'll be adjusting all of these as well, but I'm not quite done with my glass material. I'd like to add a little bit more to it. Substrate materials have a second roughness. So there's a secondary specular lobe. That just means that there's more specular that we can adjust here if we want to. And how much of that secondary lobe we want is determined by the second roughness weight. So we can make a couple of parameters for those. So I'm going to make a second roughness and a second roughness weight and hook those in for second roughness and the second roughness weight, respectively. I'll go ahead and apply this, and now we can go ahead and start tweaking on our material instance. So I'm going to get MI glass, and I'm going to just see what happens as I start playing with things a little bit. So I'm going to take my flatten normal and nerf it down a bit. I'm going to take my roughness and move that down a bit as well. I'm going to take a second roughness, give it a little bit of value. Of course, I need second roughness weight as well. So I can kind of see what those look like as I adjust them. I can change my thin film IOR. You can see what that looks like. If you drag it up, there's going to be a lot. I like a subtle thin film, so I'm going to make it almost go away completely. And for the thin film panning Y, I can see what it looks like if I turn it up, but it doesn't look quite right. So I do just want 0.004 for that, so it's really slow. So I'm pretty happy with how this looks. I may like a little bit more roughness, maybe 0.1 or 0.2, to give it a little bit of that foggy look. Now it's kind of hard to see what this really looks like out here in broad daylight, but I can go to my blueprint as well. So from here, I think I'll give it a little more flattened normal and just up that refraction a little bit, like so. I'll bring this in to a darker level as well. So that gives us our orb, and it's really a pretty cool effect. You may want to lower that refraction just a bit if you don't want the inner orb to be so small when you get farther away. So that's completely up to you. And I typically like to crank up my emissive to make things look a little bit more magical. And the cloud darkness gives it a little bit of contrast there. We now have some really cool materials we can use, either just the orb by itself or the orb with the glass. And this gives us a little bit of practice with substrate materials, which is always exciting. So once you get these orbs into a level where you have the lighting environment that you want, you can really start to tweak the parameters to your liking. And we have a number of parameters that allow us to get sort of a variety of different effects, which is kind of nice. So hopefully you can find some interesting ways to use this material. I hope you liked this tutorial. If you did, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and consider joining the Patreon. You can get the project files for this on my Patreon as a one-time purchase, and I have Patreon exclusive content as well, so check that out if you like. There's a link in the description below. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you later.